7, if you want to follow along.
So Assistant Superintendent Starzecki did stop by when the board was in closed session and was hoping to be able to cover her section of the report. But unfortunately, she had a family event tonight, daughter's dance recital. And of course, we all know how important it is to be at those things. So she had to take her leave and go attend that. So very quickly in her report, she notes a few different items. One is dress code policy. She has asked that the Student Handbook Committee meet to discuss handbook policy around dress code and consider some changes, recommendations, and revisions to that policy. Also wanted to inform you that she is working to complete her annual evaluations of all of our principals across the district, which is a regular annual event. And also has been working and met with the new Assistant Superintendent, Jeff Horton, to have some conversation about transitioning into that new role for him as she moves on to Superior.
Any questions? Seeing none, you get to continue on.
All right, I just need to pull that up quickly. In our first curriculum director's report to the board, and I believe that at board direction this will be a monthly event that will be a part of the education committee. So I will start by giving the first, and then I will in a moment introduce our new curriculum director, and she is aware of the expectation that she will be creating a report for the board each month. So just some quick project updates, things we're working on in the curriculum department. This time of year we do a lot of end-of-year purchasing. We're planning and prepping for the next year in terms of equipment, materials, and supplies, so we're purchasing those things, getting them into the district, and then starting to plan how we distribute those out to staff. So that's happening within our department, and Joan Lancour is working very, very hard on that. Leadership transition, Gail Netland, who will be your new curriculum director, I'll ask her to wave and has been wonderful in that she's been here a number of days, and we've been talking through her responsibilities as curriculum director and some of her responsibilities with education committee and other pieces throughout the organization. So we've gotten to spend some good time together on transition conversation. An update on our high school English novel selection process. Part of that is within our policy, it does state that we need to be considerate of our diverse community when we select new materials. And so as a part of that, we have reached out to different community partners with whom we interact as a district and invited them to consider both recommending potential books for review and also sending a member of the group to serve on the novel selection committee. And so we've sent out a number of those invitations to groups around the community. Another piece is we're planning for our opening staff development day next year. We always coordinate in the curriculum department our opening staff development day. Right now, we always lead off with the superintendent's welcome back. We're planning for a keynote speaker in the morning. We're currently looking at, his name is Salome Thomas L. He is a principal along the East Coast and is a kind of a nationally known keynote speaker. And so we've had conversation with him, and he's committed to be here with us for that day. We're also going to be talking about enhanced lockdown procedures. We're talking about revising those within our crisis management plan, and there will be time for building principals to lead conversation of how those new processes will look in their buildings. I am personally working on end-of-year evaluations for the administrators that I oversee within our department. We have a number of academic administrators that I supervise, and I'm working to finalize those evaluations. And then lastly, we have been working on kind of a math pilot project in some of our courses for students who are off track or off path for graduation in math, looking at different instructional approaches and see how those work for our students. In our first year, we piloted that in Algebra 1 with our students at the high school and have seen good feedback and results from our teachers who have used the new approach. And so we're planning to phase in the next year so that students who've been a part of that can experience a similar instructional style and approach for the next year.
I know that this English novel selection has been a priority of yours, and in the beginning you said that it was going to be completed before you leave. Is that still the anticipated timeline?
Not even close. In all honesty, we tried to move the process along, and as we dug in, we included our teachers, we had conversation about process and how this should go. It was it became apparent that it would take more time to do it and do it well. So we've kind of laid it out a tentative process. I've talked to Ms. Netland and shared with her what that tentative process looks like, brought her up to speed on where we're at in the process, and kind of talked about next steps and transitioning that over to her leadership.
And so is it anticipated that it will be in place before the school year begins, or is it going to be a continual process?
So I think our goal with this is that both of those units within our time frame were second semester units. They happened in the latter half of the school year, and so the goal would be to have final novels selected, communicated to the board and purchases approved, and in-house and distributed to staff before the second semester when we teach those units.
Okay, thank you.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Yep. Thank you for your work. I had a question about Staff Development Day. Will all staff be in attendance? Paraprofessionals and just
Yes.
all across the board?
Our opening Staff Development Day includes all of our certified and non-certified staff. From time to time, there's conversation over the summer that if need be, example, if we feel it's critical to have our buildings open for incoming families, since it is close to the beginning of the school year, sometimes we'll schedule a different opportunity for our clerical staff, and that's usually the only group where there's some question. Otherwise, everybody's in attendance.
Okay. Just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
Superintendent Granzo.
I just wanted to mention that Salome Thomas L. I've had the opportunity to hear him speak and be in some workshops with him. He's the author of I Choose to Stay and The Immortality of Influence, among other books.
Seeing no other questions, thank you, Dr. Carey, for everything. That would be great. We're going to move on then to our part of our committee agenda where we have presentations, informational presentations, and our first group is our ALC and AEO group. So Adrian, I see, is there.
So my folks aren't here today.
Okay.
They made a video and they asked that I play that and then we can do some Q&A.
Councilmember Lawford-Kemp.
Yep. Thank you for the presentation, and please share that with your staff, that we appreciated their time putting it together. It also was really great to be at the ALC and the online graduation, so it was fun to talk to the students and their parents. My question about your presentation, I wondered, as I've talked with some of the families that have kids both from the Duluth School District and some of the other families I'm aware of in both programs, how are you engaging, and what are ways that you communicate with families, and do you have some goals in that kind of area of increasing parent engagement and involvement?
So one of the things
Adrian, I think we need to ask you to come up to the mic so that our home audience can find us.
One of the things that with our online school that we're going to try to implement into our ALC as well is each student in our online school has a mentor, and that could be parent, guardian, older sibling. We're looking to try to do that with our ALC kiddos as well, keeping in mind that 65% of our kids are 18 and older, and they may opt not to. That's one method that we're gonna try to implement. And it's embedded right into our digital programming. So they'll have a 10,000-foot view of what's happening with their kiddo, and they'll be getting email and text blasts from us as well. So we built a database out of all that as part of our process. And I know there was a question yesterday you asked me to address today about fuel education.
Oh, okay.
So that's our digital provider that provides curriculum and content. It is the majority of what we use for our credit recovery program. It is state approved, it's aligned, and we've already pulled it apart and made it work as far as what it looks like on a continuum with the Duluth content. It is an adaptive release program. That's something we haven't figured out how to do with our own content, but we are working on some stuff with that. So it tests prior knowledge of where a kiddo is at. So for example, if they met half the standards, it'll do a pretest and acknowledge that, and then the rest of the course is built based on what standards they have not met yet in order to be awarded the credit. So that's our partner that we've had since 2012, I want to say, 2013, that we've worked with. I didn't know what other questions you had other than maybe explaining what we use it for.
Great. Member Oswald.
Thank you. I know when we realigned our comp ed money for our traditional sites, you're still receiving some comp ed money, and I was wondering if your CIT teams are going to be held to the same standard of taking whatever comp ed money you do get and following the plan on how to best serve your students. And can you remind us how much comp ed money you actually get for ALC?
It's complicated and it's tricky because ALC can encompass a lot of different things. So not just our seat-based kids or our independent study kids, credit recovery kids, it also is the interventions at the middle and high school. Mm-hmm. I know those are things that we're working on pulling apart to try to figure it out. And I don't 100% know how to answer that at this point, but it's something we've been working on.
And so I guess maybe just the other part of the question of is your CIT team going to be in charge of being accountable for how those funds are administered, or is there a separate entire plan since you're not a traditional site?
I just recently proposed a plan with them that they approved and shared with the entire staff, and I shared it with Tim so far because it would go towards staffing.
Okay, I look forward to hearing about that plan.
But we're kind of behind everybody else we don't roll enrollments, we don't get the same kids, and ours is complicated. It's like we're always working backwards in our model instead of the traditional sites. So ours is different every single year.
Member Kirby.
Thank you. I note on the data that 2014 things seem to take off. what happened in 2014? And secondly, I noticed that in the spring, over the last year, the enrollment's gone from 175 to 350. What do you do about staff with that increase? And are those from here, or are they from other places?
That's a complicated one, too. Since we serve the entire state, they do come from other places. A majority of our students are internal within the district, and kids are just figuring out that there's different options out there, and they're figuring out how to make it work within their schedule. With our kiddos, we have teen parents, we have kids at work. They want flexibility within their day, and so they are seeking a different option. You asked about the trend lines and when it took off. It was when it transformed from Unity High School to an area learning center, and it took a year or two to get everything digitally off the ground, and with staffing and training staff and the work that they're doing, it's some really great stuff, and I'd hope you guys could all come down and take a look at some of the products that they've created. It's very engaging, and it's how kids learn now. And so they will seek it out and try to find what fits their needs.
Superintendent Grantsev.
A couple things that I wanted to point out. The number of students, we have conversations about these differences at the board each month when we talk about APUs. So I believe this is the number of students, not APUs. So that's how many students how many noses are connected to the program, not how many full-time schedules there are.
Yep. So for our online school, they average 1.4 classes each for that number of students. So it equates out to like 85 full-time kids for our online school. As far as those credits that they did make a little bit of a misstep, 1,057 half credits were earned this year through our ALC. And that was just the credit recovery independent study piece, not counting our seat-based kids. That equates out to 177 full-time kids earning all the credits. So there's hundreds and hundreds of kids that roll through there to equal that.
Go.
You have other questions?
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
I was going to say that in 2014, where you see that start of a climb, that is, Adrian has done a great job of really redesigning and having a reboot of the entire program and how we approach the Area Learning Center and credit recovery and the independent study. All of those pieces have changed. It's also about the time when we started AEO, and all of that was growing together, and it really changed how we approached instruction at the site. So the team that Adrian was able to put together has done incredible things, and it has shown in the results. We hope to continue this work. A challenge that we have, and Adrian touched on it too, was the school within a school. Because we flow our interventions through the Area Learning Center for our middle and high schools, it does create additional duties for Cattery Little, our MARS coordinator, and our clericals as they're reallocating students from those sites to ALC, and it creates some complications as far as our reporting with assessments, as far as some of our budgeting, and so we are looking at if there's enough benefit to run the school within a school versus just running our interventions through each of the schools. So that's one of the things that we're discussing. We have an appointment coming up with MDE to talk about all of that, because there's some confusion about which kids are actually going to ALC and which kids are actually at the site and funded through ALC. And so that's an area that we're going to be looking at and possibly making some changes to.
Member Oswald.
This may be a premature conversation because we haven't had a chance to talk about it, but we're going to be talking about our interim technology plan. And I don't know if you're aware of what's in that plan or not, so I don't know if you can answer my question. My question is going to be, is what's in that plan going to hinder in any way our ability to deliver an online education with AEO?
So I took steps, worried that the earth was crashing, and I updated with my budget so that we could go one-to-one with our students downstairs, and also some outreach one-to-one. And so we are up to date right now. So I should be good for the next 3 to 5 years. If the sky is falling, I should be able to make it.
All right. And so we're not going to have any problem with teachers being able to create curriculum or anything like that. It's all good.
We are in a good spot.
All right. Thank you for planning ahead.
Dr. Carey.
We'll get into this a little deeper in the interim tech plan, but just since you asked, I'll follow up. The interim tech plan is a base, and then where we have specific programs that require additional technology needs above that in order for the program to function, then we would look at what those technology needs and address them on a program-by-program basis. And I can give you an example. So a classic example, I know Mr. Vietz is sitting back there. We have our engineering program. It requires CAD-based software to do design work. You can't run CAD-based software on a Chromebook. You need a PC, and you actually need a higher level PC with more processing power. So in those cases, we would continue to provide those resources.
So I just have a few questions as well, and I know that I would invite you to come back and visit us next fall or during our cycle, because I really think online, especially our AEO, is growing, and I just want to make sure that we're ready for that growth and that we are supporting all of our schools and all of our kids. But my question is, so what does a full-time AEO student look like? Is that a 5-class?
State champion tennis player.
Yes, that's
what it
true.
looks like. Yeah. Yep, a full load would be just similar to a brick and mortar.
Okay. And then dual, when they're a dual student, I would imagine their homeschool, if their homeschool base was, say, Denfeld actually loses some student P per pupil, and AEO has that percentage? We share that?
Correct.
Okay.
One of the goals when we started it was to keep the money in the district, because we were losing kids left and right to dozens of different providers that are out there. I think there's 33 now. And so the two things that we were tasked to do, create your own content for it and make it engaging and good for kids, and keep the kids here in the district. And so we've done that, and it's also helped grow because we've gotten kids from outside the district, and it's a financial gain in the bigger picture because we're pulling outside revenue in.
And pardon me, too, for all these questions. I'm sure it's because I'm new. But
right.
So are we a 9 through 12?
Correct.
AEO? So when we look at, asking our students the hybrid, or I worry a little bit about 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds knowing what's the best way that they learn. If we're not doing some of that in middle school, where we actually are looking at students and how they learn best, and allowing that student to know truthfully how they learn best. So it's a 9 through 12 opportunity.
Correct.
Okay. Does the staff at ALC and AEO, are they the same?
They wear the same hats.
So you can be an AEO instructor here and also then an ALC instructor?
Correct.
Okay, cool. And on our AEO, do the students ever, I know that in your goals you said something about small group meetings. Do they meet with their teachers in person?
So our local students can and have that option.
But they don't have to.
They don't have to.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Member Lafayette.
I just had one more question about the summer school credit earned slide. How many students were involved are generally involved with the summer school day?
So last year's seat-based program had 150 students in it, and that was housed at Denfeld. And our credit recovery digital version that we do downstairs had 300 students, 299.
Okay.
And it started today.
Can you just maybe elaborate on the credit recovery, just in case some people might not be familiar with that?
Student will have had to have failed the course in order to take summer school. We offer two options, a seat-based program just like any other traditional brick and mortar would offer, and it's at Denfeld. It's held there because that's where the meals are served and the largest population of our students. The credit recovery piece that's downstairs is the digital version of the course where they can get one-to-one help with a teacher. So we have a licensed teacher behind every class, and they work side by side with them. And it is the adaptive release piece that I brushed on earlier.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions? Again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then I invite our residential sites, Chester Creek, Merritt Creek, Rock Ridge. Thank you for coming. Thanks, Adrian. Have a nice summer. Yeah, I'd love to know more. I'd just find out more.
Hey, thank you.
We're going to try to put your PowerPoint up on the
All right.
screen, too.
I was wondering if you wanted us to do that or not, so
I think Superintendent Grant is going to. And then do we want to try to flip that a little bit so our audience can see more? Or are you good out there? You're good? You want to hear? You can hear. I don't think those mics are on.
yeah, you got to turn the mic on, guys, when you talk. So I'm obviously Denise Claremont. I'm the principal for the residential sites, and obviously the residential sites encompass more than just Chester Creek, Merritt, and Rock Ridge, but our site plan, we focus basically on those three buildings because they're the biggest buildings. So I am just going to let people introduce themselves and share a little bit about where they're at and their buildings. So
I'm Carol Dahl, and I work at Merritt Creek, and I teach 5th grade.
I'm Sherry Delbeck. I teach at Merritt Creek, and I teach secondary science.
I'm Moira Olson, and I'm the early elementary special education teacher at Chester Creek Academy.
Ann Eck, and I teach health and physical education at Rock Ridge.
And I'm Brenda Schomburg, and I teach secondary science at Chester Creek.
Thank you.
want us to wait or go ahead?
So we start with celebrations.
Okay, that's
Always the best part.
Yeah. Some of the things that we're most proud of, recognition of student academic and behavioral achievement, and we do a monthly over the intercom and just introduce kids that got the math award or physical education award, Successful transition to Rock Ridge after a long haul. Woohoo! Increased individual reading and math growth. Student use of credit recovery options has increased. Increase of positive behavior during MCA testing, and more students seem to be invested in their education. I think a lot of that has to do with just the building the relationships with kids and letting them know that it's important to get your education. We piloted a fast testing program in grades 6 through 8 at Chester, Merritt, and Rock Ridge Academy. We had increased numbers of graduates. 2015-16, Rock Ridge had 13, Arrowhead Academy 1. 16 and 17, Rock Ridge 13, Arrowhead Academy 1. 17-18, Rock Ridge can now read 13 with one graduating in August, so that'll be 14, and then Arrowhead Academy at 1. Thank you.
What's next? Certainly celebrations.
All right, we'll go on with enrollment. The students that we serve come from a variety of districts and also states. We don't just serve the Duluth Public Schools, but numerous districts throughout our state. Residential sites serve students with significant mental health issues, behavioral disabilities, and sometimes they have to complete court-ordered kind of a stay. And this is done through partnering agencies. Our enrollment changes frequently throughout the year, like extremely frequently. And it depends on what the students need. It depends on the outside agencies, and it's really dictated by them. And during the time that students are at our schools, they receive mental health treatment through therapy, and that can impact their performance both positively and negatively if they're in their treatment and they're digging into some past trauma. Sometimes those are not good days or good weeks or sometimes good months. But if they're in a good spot, it's a whole different thing. They're safe, they're being fed, they've got, their education.
Yeah.
And then, it impacts their classroom and then statewide testing as well. Our average student enrollment is approximately 6 to 9 months. There are numerous students, though, that come back or will be like at Merritt for a while and then maybe go to Chester and then come back to Merritt. So sometimes we see that as well. Students with more severe needs sometimes are up to 2 years. It really depends. Sometimes they get discharged and go out to their home school, and then we see them back within a very short time. But then some of them we don't see back ever, which is really good. For the 16-17 school year for Chester Creek, the average days that students stayed were 236. For Merritt Creek, it was 175, and also the same for Rockridge.
All right, so the other part we want to share with you, enrollment, because at any given time, we have a set number of beds that get filled and a set number of places for day treatment. But if you look at our overall enrollment, I think it shows a bigger picture. And you can see, too, by the slide there on 15-16, the total number of kids that were enrolled at Arrowhead, Bethany, Chester, Merritt, Rockridge, and Superior Academy was 994 students. The next year, 16-17, was 1,004. And then this year, at the end of the school year, I just looked, and it was 993 students. These are more students than any of the elementary schools enroll and Lincoln Park Middle School. So just to give you an idea, at one point we might have maybe 300 kids in our building at one time in a couple different buildings, but over the year long we have almost 1,000 kids that we service. And obviously at AJC some of them might be there for a day or two, but sometimes they come back too. But it's like we deal with a lot of different students within our given year. And I think Sherry touched on it too, that a lot of the students are not Duluth students, but they come from neighboring, districts as well. So we get to know a lot of our neighboring district people well, adults and kids. Mike only gets rid of part of us, he still gets to deal with us in a different way. Yeah. So we're looking forward to that one, Mike. I think the next one, Eddie's not here today. We have one more person that's on our leadership team, and all these people volunteer their time to be on the leadership team. And it was like 2 from each building made the most sense. So that way we got kind of an elementary and a secondary point of view from the 3 buildings. So that was a nice part, and I thank these ladies for all their hard work and time they spent. MCA scores really don't show a lot for us because unfortunately the kids that we're testing during MCA time are not always the kids that we see again next fall, like most of them not. So we've had to kind of search and seek out different ways of how do we measure growth that our kids are actually obtaining. So we have really focused on using what's called the STAR testing that just kind of gives a quick snapshot of what kind of reading skills does a student have, what kind of math skills do they have. And I know Ann also said that we have been piloting the FAST testing in all the sites for 6 through 8 for the last 3 years, and we have found that that information is very beneficial too for teachers in showing just what that individual student knows. So the next part is just kind of our demographics, which is just an overview. Obviously, some of our buildings are more unique than others. And I'm not going to read this to you, but obviously we have a high percent of kids that, qualify for free and reduced lunch. One of the criteria is if you're in a residential setting, you automatically qualify. So the kids that don't qualify would be our day treatment kids that come in from homes. We have a high population also of special ed students, not a very high population of English second learners, but every year we have several. Like in each of our buildings, we have a couple right now that are getting some ELL services. Ethnic, varies from building to building, some very high, some not. And then that again, that is like we are just always seeking out other sources of how we can identify how our kids are making progress. Alrighty.
We wanted to highlight some successes of our continuous needs assessment. We developed a common site plan. We used to each school have our own site plan, and then trying to present that and compare and measure was difficult. So we came together and tried to figure out shared goals and kind of function as one school, one leadership team with shared goals. Also worked on PLC development. What does that look like in an alternative setting with cross-curricular multiple grade levels, that sort of thing. We also have focused, many of our students are receiving trauma-based therapy, so we've tried to implement trauma-based and trauma-informed approaches to our students that aligns with the treatment that they're receiving. So we've had staff development, attended mental health conferences, that sort of thing. Also, we've increased our reading and math scores, continuing to work on those basic skills while also addressing grade level standards. Also working on student engagement and higher order thinking skills as we're developing basic skills, also continuing to challenge them. Oftentimes our students are more engaged. They're in a place to receive education and instruction for the first time in a long time. So taking advantage of that. And also balancing individual and small group interventions that might show up based on fast testing and scoring, that sort of thing.
And then we prioritized our concerns, and they include the escalated student behavioral needs, because we do have that. We have escalated student mental health needs. We make sure that the teachers are content and special education teachers. We schedule PLCs with all staff at all residential sites, and we look at the safety for the students and the staff, and of course the budget.
And like Brenda said, as a site team, we all try to figure out a common goal. And so all three of our sites, we try to focus. So our practice profile, our core focus for our sites was to use questioning and discussion techniques to engage our students. And our questions, all of us teachers try to focus on were to add some higher level thinking questions to get the kids more involved, and that was fun and challenging for both the students and for the staff. And with Denise, she had her PLC, they did their walkthrough and what things they observed. And on the next page, you'll see that the little pie chart that we had, and it shows with Chester, Merritt, and Rockridge the percentage. And over to the right are the numbers, the percentages that you see. And I think somewhere you can hover over those and you can see what they were looking for. And that was our focus. And it was, I think, fun and challenging for myself, and I believe with my students as well. Oh, not in the PDF.
All right. Questions? Oh, yeah. Questions, comments, ideas? Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Yeah, thanks. Well, for folks at the Rockridge Academy, I am so glad you're in my neighborhood, and it's great to have you as neighbors. I just wanted to talk or hear a little bit more about the trauma-informed training that staff have had. I know there's been a lot of staff training in that area, and thank you for reporting on it. It's an area of interest for me, and so can you just kind of, is it kind of ongoing training? And
it is ongoing training, and one of the positions that we added when we went to Rockridge is to have a trauma-based coach to work with teachers, to go into the classroom to kind of help out with some of the severe behaviors we were seeing, and trying to look at, is some of the instruction causing some of that? Is it the way we're responding to kids that's adding to that? So we have had the luxury at Rockridge this year to have an extra person to go in and help teachers out. From some of the other buildings, it was pulling in some other speakers just to talk to people. We did one presentation. Northwood actually did one for us with all of the residential sites too. We also did some training at Rockridge, or at least it was like when we're at Cobb, I guess it was, but with one of the local therapists too.
Okay, thank you.
Because it's like all of our kids seem to have a story. We don't always know their stories, and we don't always know what their triggers are, but it's kind of like if you have at least some of that overall education about different triggers and maybe just things that you just don't bring up at that point or time, that seems to be a consensus of our kids doing better and focusing more on the academic part.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We can move on. Thank you. Just again.
And thank you guys for all coming for graduation at Rockridge. It's always an interesting endeavor, but we always want to celebrate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I know successes and concerns. We're going to keep working with you and celebrate and be working as partners. Thank you. Thank you. Next on our agenda, then moving on, is our interim technology plan, right? So Bart's going to come up. All right. And I know, and Dr. Carey's going to lead this section.
I'll kind of lead the initial introduction, and then Bart is here to kind of help answer any specific tech platform or other kind of technology-related questions you may have. So, long story short, our purpose of the plan was to give you a little history first, so you had some background information of what's been put in place in our facilities across the organization. And then also to lay out some of the position that we are in terms of budget, and have conversation about what a sustainable plan looks like that fits within our current budget allocation that we have within our technology department. And then also include some options so that if down the road we're able to consider additional investment or opportunity within technology, you would have an idea of what some of those various costs look like if any one of those were a priority for the board. So in summary, you'll be able to see kind of the technology pieces that were historically put in place. But I'm going to move down the report and just kind of introduce what we're looking at in terms of major changes going forward, because I think those are probably the biggest priority conversation points. So historically, we had desktop computers in our labs and within and deployed to our teachers. When we took a look at the cost of replacement of a desktop and then maintaining both a wired network, right, so wires running through walls and plugging into machines that sit in one place, and then also maintaining a wireless network in order to be able to access internet wirelessly through your devices or Chromebooks or other pieces. It became more cost effective and functional to move towards kind of a more wireless only or wireless dependent network system. So in terms of cost, if you look at just wired or just wireless, the cost to maintain one or the other is about the same. But maintaining and leaning towards wireless gives you more flexibility in terms of where you can use devices and where you can provide education within a building. So from that, our look was to take a look and say, we think that in terms of base model, moving towards a more wireless setup makes better sense than staying in a static wired setup. So you'll see we're transitioning away from desktop computers and wired network connections and over to Chromebooks for students and teachers and the mobility they provide and a wireless network. That's one of the major changes. One of the other major changes is shifting from smart boards to digital displays. And that is purely a cost situation. When you take a look, a digital display can cost about half of what a smart board does. And when you take a look at the overall cost to be able to replace all of our smart boards on a regular schedule across the district, financially it's just not feasible within the current technology budget we have. So as part of the interim plan, we still want to make sure we have opportunities to digitally display information for students. And so the more cost-effective option was to move to just a digital display similar to something like the one we use here for our board meetings.
Can I also pop in that the smart board at the time was at the cutting edge of technology, and now there are different models, right? Now the smart boards don't have necessarily the board attached. Some of them are just the projector and you're touching the wall, or there's smart tables, or there's also going to if our goal is at the end to go to a one-to-one, then all of our students should be engaging in what's going on rather than one person at a time being at the smart board.
I was going to thank you for making that point. I was going to go there, but I appreciate you jumping in. The bigger one of the pieces we're trying to look at is where were we? What do we have resource to be able to maintain, and how then would that hub into what our future may look like, or we may desire it to look like? I think it's fairly common in many districts that have gone one-to-one, that desire and need for the big interactive board at the front of the room isn't quite as high because students have their own devices that they can interact on, work on, and interact with content. So maintaining that expense, we just felt that our resources could be better utilized in other places, and that it may position us better for a potential shift down the road. So really those are the, I think, biggest pieces that people will notice. The other pieces that I think may be noticed is some of the camera infrastructure and other pieces that you'll note there. Right now, and then Bart could probably give a little more detail to this because it's more security related than instructionally related, so I'm not as tightly connected to those pieces. But we had a certain number of cameras that were put in place as part of the long-range facility plan upgrades. We currently don't have the budget to be able to maintain all those cameras, and so right now our plan is to maintain what's currently in place as long as we can, but we don't currently have replacement budget for those pieces. And all of those items are outlined in more detail as you kind of go through the report.
Member Oswald.
Thank you. I have many questions, as you can imagine, but I will yield after a couple for other people. My very first question, I think Bert may be able to answer best, is what was your technology budget at the end of at the completion of the long range facilities plan, and what is your tech budget now? How much has it changed?
It's pretty close to the same. The difference was the long-range facility plan was picking up a lot of the expenses, was picking up the switches, was picking up all the phones, was picking up, the computers and stuff when we were putting them in.
So is it fair to say that you have had money to maintain but not money to replace or renew it? I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around an idea that prior boards to us didn't plan on maintaining what we had. And I'm trying to understand why, if it's still about the same, why we can't keep going with what we have.
Because we didn't actually, maintain it when it was brand new, because it came in brand new,
Right.
and the budget was never there when they put it in, saying, hey, here's additional budget to maintain the 960 cameras we have, because we didn't have the cameras, or the phone system, the 1,000 phones we have.
Sure.
We didn't have those.
Thank you for that. My other, I guess I have just a generalized comment, because I'm extremely frustrated by this entire thing, because we still have 15 or 16 years to go to pay these buildings off, at my last guess. And we're still paying for a vision that we agreed to when we were sold this idea of our new schools and our new vision. And now this plan takes away what that vision promised. And I have a hard time with that as a community member, being at those meetings, being told we're going to have these state-of-the-art facilities and they're going to be all interactive and it's going to be great. And now we're going to have kindergartners staring at a TV screen instead of being able to touch and manipulate things on a smart board. It doesn't have to be a smart board to me, but teachers use them at an elementary level different than they use them at a middle school level, and different than they use them at a high school level. My background is in the elementary levels. As a sub, a smart board was vital to me, because I would walk into an assignment not knowing what I was teaching or how I was teaching it, but I always knew I had the smart board I could go to and pull up something related to something that I knew they were doing. And get the kids involved and get them moving and get them interactive, and not just go put something up on a screen going, look at this YouTube video. No, it was learning. That's my frustration, and I know that our community will be on us, saying, you promised us, and now we can't. So I want to know how we can get as close to the promise, knowing that we can't afford what we have. I mean, I get that reality. I get we can't replace what we have. I guess my real concern, and I guess my one question before I yield the floor is how are we going to ensure that without a one-to-one program, the equal accessibility to a Chromebook, because we know schools have different and varying amounts of Chromebooks. Is there a plan to address that?
So I'll address the first piece about the vision, which is over the years, at least that I know I've been working with Bart, and we've been talking about technology budgets and where we're at and what we can sustain. I think our hope was every year through the budget process, as we try to prioritize our spending and look at what our needs are across the district, I think we were always hopeful that we would be able to pull more money and resource into supporting the maintenance of that plan. When things didn't work out that way, because we had to make tough decisions about how we prioritize and support things, we felt we finally reached a place now where we need to clearly communicate this plan, give some time and forewarning to our staff of what those changes will look like before we start to implement, and then also give you, the board, the information on what some of these things would cost. If you want to see some of that plan sustained, maintained, or create a new vision for what the future looks like. So that's kind of why we intentionally structured this to add in some of those line items with kind of what an annual cost would need to be in order to maintain a cycle of not only maintenance but replacement of that equipment over time, so that you were well informed of what that commitment would look like going forward.
If I could just respond to that immediately. I think it's great that we get numbers attached to what would happen. The problem is that we have no context for those numbers. We don't know how that fits in a budget, because we just get the big picture. We don't know if we invest, whatever it is, like if for one-to-one, elementary one-to-one, you say it's $590,000 investment. We don't know where that money comes from. We don't know which fund it can come from. Because we don't manage that budget. The superintendent does. So it's a little disconnected to say that we're well informed by knowing how much it costs because we don't know how to fund it because we don't necessarily fund it ourselves. Do you understand where I'm coming from on that?
The piece that I think I was alluding to is that each year when we go through the budget process, we talk about priorities and where we want to address and shift and move funding in the global scheme of things. And so we wanted you at least to know that if those were things that the board wanted to consider and dig into more deeply, you could at least be armed with the information about what that cost would be, and that could help you lead into the conversations about where in the grand scheme of district budgets would that money come from to support those things.
And then, to your point, Member Oswald, and to reiterate Dr. Carey too, I do think we do. If we have the budget as a board, we just have to be a little bolder. And for me, I have to learn how to state and be ready for it. But we as a board certainly can say, when we start the budget process, which we're doing in January, we can put this in and direct our board. We somewhat did that. We tried with comp ed dollars. We directed that before the budget process started. And I think I was really hoping we could do more with class size as put it in the budget. So that's one thing. Couple other things. I do think, because I've watched I've watched Chromebook interaction with middle schoolers, and I've watched screen interaction at some of our residentials, and there's a lot. Just like smart boards have a lot of tools, there will be a lot of tools. Elementary kids will interact with Chromebook, and we have. I believe that might even be less intimidating. So instead of having to go up to the smart board to interact with it, which some students shy away from, they'll have their Chrome. But getting all the Chromes is our challenge. You're right. And then I am, just generally, from my background, I'm really appreciative of our outlook on technology that has been crafted and gives us. Let's not lose this handout. Let's keep this front and center for us as we travel these next months to engage in it. Maybe it's something that we can apply. I don't know, because I don't know anything about referendums and levies, but we could be gearing. We have some really solid plans and visions that we can go to our community about over the next few months. And I also think that we are struggling like other districts across the country with budgets and where our priorities have to be. We've chosen priorities of, maintaining other priorities, textbook adoptions or other spending, or just the decrease, the rise in everything, the mental health issues. We've talked about that. Special ed funding that, we have stressors on our budget. So technology hasn't been. I think of the positions we had. A few years ago, we were forerunning on the technology department, the employees we had that were out in servicing on and doing so many forward things. And we just got caught in what every school district, I think, in the country is struggling with, and that's a budget to maintain everything. So
not every school district in the country has made promises to their community and getting them to pay for new schools. That's the part that I have a problem with. We made a commitment, so I have a problem with removing what we're still paying for.
But Member Oswald, can't we put to rest the long-range facility plan? It's a new board and a new direction.
Member
and
Lofall,
the promises. I went through that, and I really believe that we are doing the best we can do. And I really want us to move forward. We have some technology. We have some vision to go backwards and remind our community of things that many of us were elected to go forward. Then let's not go back and say we made the promises 12 years ago. None of us were on the board then. The superintendent wasn't here.
And the superintendent decides to makes those budgets. Investments or not. So.
Well, but we haven't told them to do that. If we tell them, they will make that investment. Let's keep working.
Well, I will move forward. And I don't take kindly to the thought that I am bringing up old stuff, because I'm not. I'm dealing with our current reality and situation. That's my discussion. This is the community expectation right now. That's the only thing I'm talking to. And the community expectation is that we have 21st century schools, and when I look at this plan, we're going back to the 20th century. That's the way I see it. I don't know. I would love an expectation or an explanation of what are we going to do without network printers? What is the plan without printers? I don't know.
Right now we have a much larger printer fleet than what you need. It's a fairly, I'll speak to my previous experience. The organization I came from previously, before I came to Duluth, had recognized that they had let a number of printers creep in, and there were printers all over the place. And it was highly convenient, probably more convenient for individuals, but certainly not necessary to maintain the function of the organization and meet the printing needs of the organization. And so part of what we were doing there was consolidating the number of printers we had, making sure we were purchasing more efficient printers that were cheaper at higher volume, and then making sure we placed those strategically so that people would have reasonable access to it. And in the end, what we did is we saved on printer purchase, we saved on cost per copy, and we were able to really cut down our printing budget and increase our printing efficiency. So this doesn't necessarily say that printers would go away completely, but it does mean that we would have to do a lot of work to consolidate what that looks like. So that's an important point. I wanted to answer your other question that I didn't get to. I answered part of one, but not the other. And the part I didn't answer was, what is the plan for making sure that we have consistent numbers of devices across our district? From a central office perspective in our planning, we always make sure that we are pushing out kind of on a ratio basis the number of devices we would need in each site based on the number of students we typically serve at that site. Now, the part we can't always control, and we've allowed principals and other organizations to supplement, is use of discretionary budgets or use of PTA or other monies to be able to add to that number. We try to maintain at least a minimum expectation across the organization of the number we provide per student, but we do see other groups helping supplement and increase that number sometimes, and often sometimes in a variable way from site to site.
Right, and I think that adds to the perception that some have more than others, and I don't know the answer to that. The one thing that concerns me, if I can revisit the smart board discussion one more time, is that when we were building MacArthur, and I was on that MacArthur team, we were told that we didn't need many writing surfaces in our classrooms because our chalkboards and our whiteboards were replaced by this machine. So all of our classrooms have been built to a standard with a 4x4 whiteboard on the side of our smartboard. You take away the smartboard and you take away interactive ways for kids can write on them and whatever, but you're left with a 4x4 whiteboard. When 8 and 12-foot blackboards and chalkboards and whiteboards were taken out purposefully because they were given this technological way to interact. So my question is, are we going to have to invest in easels and paper? How are we going to maintain the ability for students to be able to express themselves writing in front of classes and together in groups within our classrooms? I mean, is this entirely going to be focused on a Chromebook, which still has the limitations, and not every student is going to have a Chromebook until we can figure out how to make that happen?
I'd say under current plan, we would still display a lot of information digitally, but in terms of writing and those pieces, it would have to be more in small group or individually using paper.
So that also is hard on kids in the ways they learn, because a lot of our kids, including my own kids, are visual learners. And that's tough when you don't have a way to display visual information.
Superintendent Grandson.
Well, we would display the visual information because the schools would have monitors, and Chromecast wasn't a thing in the 1990s when smart boards first came out. Technology's come a long way, a decade in technology years is a long time in anybody else's years, I think. Our goal is to get to one-to-one. That's our big moon goal. That's the end of this presentation goes down to one-to-one. That's what we'd like to see. There's additional options there for other things. Right now, as we've gone through our budget and we've asked the community what their priorities are for the budget, I think we all know that the state and the federal government has not kept up with their part of funding education. We were hoping that there were going to be additional pieces in the budget for schools this session. That didn't happen. I think we've been pretty open about the fact that we're going to be asking for a referendum in the coming fall. What that package looks like is going to depend on what the community tells us that they would like to see as priorities. I think it's our responsibility to put those priorities front and center of what people want us to invest in. I think that there are many districts throughout the state who have technology referendums, which are different than regular operating referendums. And that could be a possibility down the line. When that happens, would depend on the feedback that we get from community and the direction from the board. If we wanted to go for a technology referendum in the future, that's certainly one way that we could get there. Getting to one-to-one does take an initial investment, both to get the bandwidth that we would need to do that. I think we're getting closer to that. And then purchasing those Chromebooks as you're putting that in, and then your Chromebooks are being replaced every 3 to 4 years as you go through that cycle. And so, do I think it's a possibility? Absolutely. I hope that we get there soon. Can we do it right now, today? Not with our current budget. No, we can't. So I think that the going to monitors is part of the one-to-one piece, because you'd have a monitor if you were one-to-one, because then you're displaying what's going on and everyone has on their Chromebooks. You can cast like we've been doing tonight, like that they're using in different places all around the district that have Chromebooks currently. So my hope is to one day get to that point. There are some districts that also are one-to-one, but they don't buy units. They have a bring your own device model where the school district has some Chromebooks and we bring in other devices that students already have. There are a lot of different models that we could explore if we want to get there faster. Then if that becomes a budget priority, then there would be other things that would need to be scaled back. It's all choices.
Member Oswald.
So when looking at the schedule of replacement for the smart boards, is this a suggestion or is this what is planned?
This is what we worked out.
Yeah, I'll turn my mic off.
This is what we worked out within the existing budget. So it was roughly 60 displays per year. We have roughly 600 smart boards across the district, so it would actually take us 10 years to roll that through. It would take us 10 years to replace them all.
And then...
And so I'm just going to finish up and then I'll yield.
For sure.
That is concerning to me, that some kids are going to have interactive ability sooner or going to lose it sooner, and kids at Congdon Park and Myers Wilkins are going to have it 10 years longer than the first people 10 years before at Lakewood and Stowe. And I had this suggestion in this conversation with Assistant Superintendent Starzecki, and I'm hoping that maybe it can be considered in that when we go to eliminate smart boards, we can start with the higher levels first, with the high schools, and then the middle schools, and then the elementaries, because I know the elementaries rely on them much more than high schools. High schools and middle schools, they can handle this without much problem. I don't know how often they use the smart features of a smart board, but I know, and I see it daily in the elementary schools, the smart features are used, and I would hope that if we're replacing them, that the elementaries would be able to hold on to it as long as possible.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Thank you for this history here and the overview, and just kind of putting it all in a back view and long view perspective. So I appreciate that. I am not going to ask you questions about some of the details of this at this point, but because I see that this process gives us lots of opportunity as board members to review and ask questions along the way. So appreciate that was built in to putting this plan together. I also really appreciated when I reviewed this that kind of the section you have on working with building leaders and staff and other stakeholders to identify needs and learning. So that section where you listed all of the schools and then kind of how you're going to work with the schools themselves and leaders. So appreciated you putting that into this plan as well. And I trust that our staff out in the buildings know a lot more about what the needs are than I do as a school board member, and so thank you for including that. I did have a couple questions on where you highlighted the technology department will continue to invest and provide support in a bunch of different areas, and one was around the emergency communication. And then further down, it talked about kind of security systems and that. And so I'm wondering if yesterday we talked a little bit in the business committee about this potential grant for security, and that you see some of that money, if we get, being used particularly in those two sections of this proposal. So, thank you. So I kind of hit on a few things, but that's my question. Comments, question. Thanks.
Quick question. Not a school finance whiz yet. I'm assuming technology is funded through general fund?
It's capital. Yep.
Capital. Okay. So would that be a pot of money that impacts our other services like classroom teachers, et cetera?
It really depends on which pieces we're talking about. Some if it's software, there could be curricular monies that would be general fund. Some of it is capital. Some of it we use E-rate. So there are different funds, but yes, if we're spending general fund dollars, those could be classroom dollars.
Okay. So I appreciate looking ahead to come up with an interim plan that's going to meet the needs and priorities of our schools, while also meeting a priority we've identified as a school board, which is to maintain classroom sizes and keep them low. We're in a time, as Dr. Carey has shared, where funding for school districts has not kept up with inflation. We have to make tough decisions, and we have to prioritize things. And I thank you for the diligence in coming up with a plan that allows us to meet that vision.
Member Oswald.
I just wanted to make a comment, or I guess a question is, I know you're recommending that there's a more formal process involving school leaders and people more directly involved. Is that going to happen, or is that just a recommendation? Because Member Loeffler-Kemp spoke to it as it already happened, but I don't understand that it already happened.
So I think people are referring to the paragraph underneath where it lists the timeline. That's what I think people are referring to.
I'm looking at the paragraph that says we also highly recommend starting a more formal process, including necessary stakeholders to identify the technology, equipment, and support needs.
Yes. So we looked at this as an interim plan. Nothing that should be intended to be ongoing and forever, and that it's basically a plan that serves a stopgap measure to make sure that we're meeting our basic needs within our budget, with the understanding that I had anticipated that the board would have some mixed feelings about where this would lead if it were in place long term, and so part of that was knowing that people might want something different than what you're seeing in this plan, that if we're going to move forward with creating a new vision of what things are going to look like, that there should be a process in place for how we include our teachers, how we include our principals, to make sure that we're making the best use of our limited resource to support teaching and learning, meet the safety needs of our children, right, and keeping our kids safe, and that we're meeting those key priorities moving forward. So that process isn't designed. It's just a recommendation that should be strongly considered if the board wants to move forward with creating a new vision of how you're going to plot out the future technology needs of the organization.
I would strongly suggest that the board consider formalizing that process. I think it's drastically needed because I don't think teachers' voices are heard in the current plan, even though I know you guys did the best you possibly could. I want to emphasize and thank both Bart and Mike, because I know none of this is directed at you. I know you guys have been working with the same budget without inflation over the years, and you're creating magic, making everything work and making really hard decisions as it is to just keep what we have. And I know we're at a breaking point, and I hope what we all can have from my conversation and all of my questions is that I value technology, I value STEM, I am a licensed science teacher. I want our kids to be focused on the future and be more productive in the workforce by being exposed to our technology. And we can't do that by walking backwards, and I'm really hoping that we can figure out how to make it work better.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Yeah, I just wanted to, reiterate, Member Oswald, that I was highlighting the area that talked about the involvement of the future plan, and I think my understanding of what Bart and Dr. Carey wanted us to do is just kind of react in a general way to this plan, and are not so much, picking apart every piece of it, but just kind of generally, and that's why I really appreciated the back overview, particularly for our new board members. So I chose to just highlight that section because it's very clear that you want to see more involvement from more stakeholders and more of our staff that are working with our kids. So just to clarify my intent of that comment.
As we come to a close of this section of our board meeting, I do want to thank all of us for courageous conversations and letting our leadership know our passions for this. Having worked in the district for as long as I have, I've seen the need for our upgrades, but I have to say that coming out of our facilities plan 12 years ago, 10 years ago, with our smart boards and our audio and our phones and all, we have had great technology, but now it's fading and some needs repairing, and that's where the budget gets tight. One clarification, just Member Oswald, and for all of us to know, when a smart board is being replaced, is our intent, even though this is just a vision for us, is it to replace with what I saw at Rockridge with this kind of display? So your plan loosely is to go to these facilities and take the smart boards out, and right then and there in that year you're replacing it with that ability.
Correct. We'd do it over the summer.
Okay, so there would be something. There wouldn't be just the no whiteboard. Because I went to Rockridge, and I know that's where we are using our, what are these called?
Those are just displays.
Monitors or displays. And I know it doesn't have the manipulatives that smart boards allow for us to do, but it is a visual that we can use. So that's the plan. If this is, again, I don't want to pick apart this process either, but for instance, if a smart board is still in good shape and it's functional in any of our facilities, does that classroom have the ability to keep it for until it, I know that right now some of the smart boards can't be replaced, they're dying with the buttons and having to place it, so what do you think?
Some of the issues we have with that is that when the teachers move around, and then that teacher, the new teacher would be orphaned with something that may or may not work for them. So we're looking at, once we go into a school, we'd remove them all.
Okay.
And then I think the key follow-up to that is that if we go into a school, we replace them all over the course of the summer so that when kids come back, you have consistency across our classrooms, at least within that building, that any functional units we would then save. And then as we go through the process, if there's a smartboard failure prematurely in a building before we're able to get to it for replacement, we have backups in reserve to go ahead and make sure they still have that capability and that it's standardized across the building.
I got you. And then my last comment too with Member Oswald is Chromebooks. Again, I understand how some of our some of our buildings have them and some don't. Some classrooms have them because it's writing the grants, or it's going to our PTA, or it's a reward for going to workshops and your name was drawn and you get the cart. But is there? I don't know, because I'm not in every classroom, and certainly in our district. How does that look? Are there? Do you feel like we are allowing classrooms to have Chromebooks when instructors can use them, like them, want them? What happens?
Actually, Bart he's tracked where all of the devices are and could provide a report for where all of the devices are.
That'd be great.
You know, some of it has been curriculum choices at the high school.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to add another layer to the possibilities, even, you know, another direction would be if we wanted to stay with smart boards or smart board capabilities, we probably wouldn't go with smart boards. We would go with touchscreen displays. And so, you know, it has the same smart board capacity, but it's a touch screen, which adds another layer of expense. So, you know, to the point of having a process and meeting the needs, you know, I think that would be something that would be determined as we move forward too. If it was, you know, if the model is, boy, we really want a display that kids can go up and touch and move things, rather than moving them on their Chromebook and having them move on the screen. You know, those would be discussions that would need to take place.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up onto the question I had about the security devices and the I think you were going to touch on that, and then we got distracted. I think I've been here too long. Bye.
Thank you. I forgot to go back to that. We did have some conversations about once we have estimates on the upgrades for security protocols that we discussed last night, that if there was some room in there, that we would try to include some cameras in that price as well. Again, there was some more information that came out today on that. I think it's going to be a little longer than we had anticipated last night, based on what the state provided us today, but it will be coming up, and we'll continue to work on those estimates.
Great, thanks.
Member Oswald.
I just wanted to follow up on your comment about the availability of Chromebooks. I think the part that my head's wrapped around in is that we're eliminating our computer labs. So having access to a Chromebook when it's not one-to-one is even more vital than not, because, you know, we're going to do all our testing, and we already do a lot of curriculum weekly testing, you know, with our new reading series. You know, kids are in grade levels are all shuffling those Chromebook carts are all around, and many of them aren't we're supposed to be replaced already. So it's not just buying more, but it's replacing most of what we already have too, and that's even more expense. So I just wanted to make sure that people understand that I'm not just harping on what they can use in the classroom. It's that's going to be the only option.
Lots of good stuff. Any other comments? We'll continue to address technology. Maybe that should be a monthly report as well. But I'll be careful of what I ask for. Thanks, Bart. Thank you, Dr. Carey. So our next item in our committee meeting is just our general grant partnerships. We have one from Lake Superior Consortium. Oh.
Can we hear from Mrs. Pam Reese maybe so she can get going?
It's just, I'm 2 seconds away. 2 seconds, yeah. Because we don't do anything with our grant things. I'm just mentioning that we've got 2 grants that we will look at and reflect on next Tuesday. One from Lake Superior College in partnership with Duluth Public Schools and Mr. Veith over there, I think, right? And then some grant applications from Lincoln Park and Preventure program that we'll look at. Right? That's it? Are you following along? You're supposed to be my buddy here. Okay. Okay. And now, though, our next item on our agenda is our Head Start information. So I invite Pam. Thank you. Thanks, Josh. Yes. Thank you. The Head Start stuff. I can read the agenda, but you should correct me if I skip something. Okay. Thank you. The mic's
Thank
yours.
you. All right. I'm passing around an update to the COLA application that you have in your packet. When I presented that item for your board book, we weren't quite through with all of the explanation, so that might help you understand what we're looking for. Basically, we have an opportunity from the Office of Head Start for a $58,751 cost of living allowance. And because that came out right after we had submitted our federal grant, the instructions say that we can ask for money for expenditures that we've had to defer or postpone, things that, are related to the rising cost of doing business operations. So, just briefly, we're looking at a few things, and I don't see any problem with this passing the Office of Head Start. We'd like to restore paid time for classroom teams to have reflective practice twice a month, and to have our mental health consultant train our advocates and teachers on how to facilitate that. Typically, that's been done by a mental health consultant, but it would save a lot of scheduling difficulties and money if we were able to have our staff facilitate that. We'd like to restore 0.5 FTE for a paraprofessional. Our health coordinator has let us know that our audiometer/TIMP has failed, and also otoacoustic emission screener is in need of replacement. Last year we bought some new computers with some extra money we had from Head Start, and sadly the dual monitors that we had for a long time for program-wide office staff were not compatible. So we're using single monitors, and for some of us writing grants and that sort of work, that's difficult. So we'd like a little bit of money for that. And then I think the last time that we put any serious money into Classroom furniture was when we had an early reading first grant in 2007. So some of our stuff is getting a little worn, and we like to keep it in good shape. So the remainder would be for that, and it's not a huge amount of money that we'd put in furniture, but right around $6,000. That would help us a lot. So we are looking for your approval, and hope that that is good with all of you. Any questions about that?
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Just a comment. I see that you did get the approval of the Policy Council and we're the governing board, but did the Policy Council have any other just comments or anything that they highlighted from this list that you'd want to share with us?
They are always most concerned about what teachers need, what classrooms need. So, if it's related to kids and families, they're all for it.
Thank you.
No other questions, members? Ideas? Concerns? Do you keep going now? Is there more to your report?
I have
There's other
four
items.
items.
Okay, yep, okay. That's what I thought. So,
And I've been challenged to see
Okay.
how fast I can do that. Okay?
Okay.
Are you okay?
we take on a challenge.
Okay. The next item is renewing our transportation waiver from last year. And essentially what that means is the Office of Head Start will grant a waiver for items generally required in transporting children. And one is they're willing to waive monitors, one monitor per 10 children, and seatbelt restraints. And so we've got 1 year under our belt of having 4-year-olds only riding the K-5 buses to school, and for those who come for a full day, they ride home as well, or they have that opportunity. And we've had, possibly a few issues, but nothing large enough to even come to my attention. I think they've been handled at the school, on the bus, with the teacher. So it's been a really great thing, and our attendance has improved as a result of that. I think the only downside for us is that we miss seeing parents. And so the connection that we'd have a couple times a day can be lacking, so we just have to work harder at that. But that's our second item that we would appreciate your approval on. And then we have our Head Start self-assessment. There are new Head Start performance standards, about 1.5 years old, and in those new standards, they allow programs to figure out for themselves how they want to complete a self-assessment and what areas they want to look at. So for us, we wanted to look at child outcome scores, as well as staff development and parent and family engagement. So we had a group of about 20 people together to embark on this task, and we looked at our outcomes for 3 and 4-year-olds. And one of the things that is more prevalent than it used to be is the achievement gap. And so what we're proposing is that we would hold focus groups with both African American parents and grandparents and American Indian parents and grandparents. We'd reach out to Indian education for some assistance, but we really want to know what we want to know what we don't know, and how we can improve our teaching, how we can reach families. Sometimes it comes down to language, And if we're always using teacher language, if you will, sometimes that doesn't translate to what kids are used to hearing at home and how they're instructed at home. And so we need some help, and that's our plan. Staff development, we basically went through and made a plan for the entire year. The only change would be on August 28th. I think Dr. Carey has other plans for that day, but we'll adjust. It's fine. And lastly, we're looking at parent and family engagement. We want to work more to engage families together. Our parents' events are typically children and parents are separated, and what we've heard from families is that they want to be together. They want a family event, and we have some experience with that, so we'll do that. We also want to seek some funds to reinstate a dad's group. That has been really popular in the past. And I think the last thing I would share is that, for the folks who are coming to school and dropping off their kids, they're kind of hanging out in the hall and they don't really know each other and it's kind of awkward. So we want to have some questions. Just, post it on a wall or in a box on the wall that, and it doesn't have to be about how did you toilet train your 2-year-old. It can be just, general questions you might ask another human being. So we want to try to get them connected in a way that we don't facilitate, but it sort of breaks the ice. And I think there are some folks we could call on who are leaders who might help facilitate that. So just some conversation. Okay?
Awesome. Yep.
Okay, and lastly, we every 3 years a program in Head Start must complete a community assessment, and in the interim years do just some updates. So I'll be very brief because you've seen this information before, but one that I always like to highlight, if I can find it here, is that on page 12, the Head Start household educational attainment. And I like to tell people that nearly 50% of our families have at least some college, many with degrees. And that's not the picture of poverty that a lot of people have. We are working with families who, many single and dual parent families who are working 2 and 3 jobs or more to make ends meet, who are college educated but for many reasons have not found the job that will support the entire family. And so I just think that's good information for the school board to have, and we're really proud of our parents. So there's more in here.
There is a ton in
here. We did a mid-year survey of parents. It's really, really positive. Mm-hmm. And I asked our folks to just type out every answer. So it's a little lengthy, but a little bedtime reading for you all. Okay. Are there any questions?
Questions from my group? Just a really complete assessment and summary. I was thinking, as we just want to know our community, it's even more entertaining than bedtime reading. But really, I felt there's so much effort put into this. I felt I wanted to read. It was really very interesting to find just all of the different summaries of the data that you've collected and presented. So this this, especially the last piece, the booklet that's 55 some pages long, that was, are you in the year that has to be presented
Next
fully?
year, we write a new 5-year grant for a new 5-year grant cycle, and that's when we'll do the full update.
This is not a full update?
Well, it's just updates, but we'll rewrite the entire, we might change it up a little bit. And
Most of it's not.
Okay.
Some of it you can't find information because it comes from census, and we're a little ways from that yet, so. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You were great.
5 minutes.
So next on our agenda is also just, before we get to, where are we at, Dr. Carey? Okay, we are. So the Minnesota State and Minnesota Department of Education and the U.S. Bank grants, right? So that, I just have to mention those. Okay. One was for Lincoln Park, drug prevention, and the Vikings one. Is that the ones? Okay. And then we are on to the commitment for an education equity framework. And I'll invite William Howes, Office of Education Equity Coordinator. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, she'll join you. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
That wasn't her. I wanted to start out by reading an acknowledgement paragraph that's included in the letter that I originally had submitted to the board, and because it's very important to me that people understand our understanding of.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know why it was in the packet.
Is it in there?
I've got it, but I don't think it is in our packet. I think the equity sheet is. Okay.
So I just want to start out by reading that, and the statement, the acknowledgement statement, is written as follows. It is vitally important that we recognize the work done by countless individuals, groups, and organizations of the Duluth Public Schools and our community that has allowed us to reach this point in our efforts to provide an equitable education for all. Through all of their experience, passion, sacrifice, knowledge, and wisdom, we are able to continue the work that was started by many before us. It is our goal to honor that work with our efforts presented here to continue to move the Duluth Public Schools towards a more just and equitable education institution. In the spirit of equity, we acknowledge all of you still here and all of those no longer with us. It's important to me that be stated for people to understand that we are not at this point in our society nor in our education system here locally in Duluth to be able to even consider an education equity framework for our school district because of some work that I myself or any one individual did. This is an acknowledgement of all of the work that countless individuals and people have done throughout time to get us to this point to even consider it. And that's vitally important to me to recognize that. Still looking for a song. I'm going to just continue on forward. I want to give a brief... Oh, there she is. You joining us?
Welcome. Come on up.
I just want to give a brief overview of the process that we went through to get us to this point. In September and October, our superintendent and assistant superintendent did a number of presentations to staff at our various sites around the district, and presented the MDE ESSA definition of equity and talked about the initial idea of our district adopting such a definition in our school district. Moving into November, the definition of equity was included in 2017 annual report document. We also began work with a very small group of 7 individuals, which I call the informants group, and we did a work session that night to gather some initial input on the tool and the definition and a process for community sessions. Moving into December, we held a focus group presentation with representatives where we invited 20 plus different groups from our community and went both within our district and outside of our district, where we expanded that conversation about the definition and the tool and how this might be done and how we might go about collecting community input on an education equity framework. We also at that time shared a Google form, which is an online survey through Google, with our certified staff group, and also shared that out with different community groups that selected or requested that. Into January and February, we continued doing a number of different networking initiatives and development of the sort of community input sessions that we intended to have to broaden the conversation and gather input from a larger number of stakeholders. At that time, Salam Witherspoon from Health and All Policies contacted me and expressed interest in wanting to collaborate with the district and with our efforts to develop an education equity framework, and initially talked a lot about making community connections and ensuring that various stakeholders were heard. And then as we met and continued to collaborate, really moved more into just furthering input and giving input on the actual framework and the ideas around it. And from there, we moved into March and April, where we provided 3 community input sessions through Think Kids, sessions that were provided. Health and All Policies also conducted, was it 3? It was 3. 3 community input sessions in various locations in our communities. And there we gathered more public input and designed ways that the components of the framework could be utilized, and gathered input on accountability measures and also implementation ideas for our district to consider. From there, we spent a good chunk of time gathering all of that input from all of those various stakeholder groups and those different types of formats of gathering information, and began to put together both the resolution of commitment that you have tonight as an action item, and also a number of various implementation ideas and accountability measures. Those were included in the last pages of the letter that I shared with you a week or so ago, or actually I think it went out with maybe it's for the board agenda. And those are a distillation of the input that was provided throughout all of those sessions. They are not mine. They're not Salam's. We do not own them. They are provided and compiled and shared with you as the most common, and a combination of many different ideas as examples for what our district could include in an implementation plan, and also as an example of ways that our district can hold ourselves accountable for doing this work and utilizing this framework for the success of more students. So that brings us to this point here tonight, which is in June, finally a presentation to the Education Committee as an action item for our Duluth Public Schools, through our school board, through the process of a resolution of commitment to commit to the implementation of an education equity framework for our school district. I would like to briefly read that resolution, or is there a different process for how that works? Can I read that? Read it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'd just like to read that, and then Salam has some comments about accountability and implementation that she would like to share. The resolution reads as such: commitment for an education equity framework. Whereas education equity is the condition of justice, fairness, inclusion, and cultural responsiveness in our systems of education so that all students have access to the opportunities to learn and develop to their fullest potentials. Whereas the pursuit of education equity recognizes the historical conditions and barriers that have prevented opportunity and success in learning for students based on their races, ethnicities, incomes, and other social conditions. Whereas eliminating those structural and institutional barriers to educational opportunity requires systemic change that allows for distribution of resources, information, and other support depending on the student's situation to ensure an equitable outcome. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Duluth Public School Board does commit to implementation of the Duluth Public Schools Education Equity Framework, which includes a definition of education equity, the Minnesota Department of Education's 10 Minnesota Commitments to Equity, and the Duluth Public Schools Tool for Equity Accountability Form. Be it further resolved that the Duluth School Board hereby directs administration to develop a Duluth Public Schools Education Equity Framework implementation and accountability plan. From the beginning, it was very important to me, many of you that I've talked to, Superintendent Gronseth, I expressed that I had no desire to invest time and energy and parts of my life into a framework which would be a very nice definition and maybe a tool and a form that would go on our website or become a part of our district, but not be utilized in meaningful ways that impact change and create change in our district. And so implementation and accountability has always been, to me, the important part of this work, and that's the work set before us. So Salam had some comments and ideas about that as well.
Well, thank you, William, for inviting me up here with you. I wanted to thank the board members and the superintendent for attending one of our wrap-up session meetings. Also, let you all know that Health and All Policies is very grateful to have been in this process for this opportunity that we of collaboration. Like at the last education committee meeting, it was mentioned that what's currently lacking from the school district is communication and transparency, and that's what Health and All Policies wants to be a part of, and that's what we've been trying to demonstrate. So as part of the implementation and accountability, we would like a commitment from board members and admin to kind of collaborate together to focus on the accountability and implementation of the framework and really see what it could become. And that's our request, to build a presentation so we can kind of demonstrate to the community what the potential that it has. And that's all I have.
I really want to thank Salam for not just the offer of collaboration and the work that she's put in, but also to push even myself to consider some different things. As many of you know, our Myers-Wilkins Think Kids looked and felt a little different than some of the others, and that was the hard work, resources, and energy and commitment brought by Health and All Policies and by Salam to say, we're going to do this, and it's going to look a little different. It might feel a little different, and we might offer a little bit of a different approach here, but we're going to do it. And I think it was, you could feel that difference. And so I've appreciated the collaboration with Salam, and I look forward to continuing that. At this time, I want to open it up if folks have questions. I don't know that we will have answers, but I will try to provide any kind of clarification. And I really strongly, again, my hope is that the resolution of commitment is moved forward, and that our full school board can vote on that at the upcoming next week's meeting and adopt that. But again, to me, that is the easy part, although this year has not been, I don't say that the work has been easy, but that's the easy part. And the real work lies ahead in the implementation, the development of an implementation plan, and the monitoring of that work with those accountability measures. So,
Superintendent Gronseth.
First of all, Alquay, William Salam, thank you so much for, I know that this has been a lot of work, but work that I know that you're both passionate about. And I know that when we first began, it kind of was a nebulous of, we need to focus on this work, and we need a way to not just talk about it, not just have a policy or a statement that hangs on the wall, but we need a way of making this part of who we are, part of our culture as a school district, that we use in equity frame of mind when we're having discussions, when we're making decisions, when we're building programs, that we're considering all of the students and all of the members of our community when we're making those decisions. And so while that starts with a definition and a statement of commitment, it really does become a way of measuring accountability. And so, we say it again and again, what gets monitored gets done. And this tool gives us a very practical way to demonstrate that we are, in fact, making sure that we are considering all members of our community and all of our students and all of their needs and the ways that our decisions affect their levels of success and their ability to thrive in the community. So it isn't my intent or anyone's intent really to say this tool is what changes it. The fact is that developing an implementation plan where we're training people, to me this tool becomes a training, kind of like training wheels for cultural change, for changing mindset when we're making decisions. That by using this tool, we begin to change the way we think about decisions, about programs, about anything that we're doing, about budgets. And so that as we continue to use this and get this deeper and deeper into our district over time, that pretty soon we don't need the tool to write it down because it's just where we go in our way of thinking. It's part of our culture and part of the way that we do things. Having an implementation plan that guides that step by step, I think I agree, is a direction that we need to go, that I want to go. I think that starts with our big decisions as districts, as administrators, as a school board, and then gets to our principals and to our teachers and farther down. I know that there were great recommendations that were provided. We'll make sure that gets added to this. I'm not sure why your letter and the implementation suggestions weren't in board book. They were meant to be, so we'll make sure that those get added to that so people can see those. There are lots of great suggestions in the implementation piece that will become part of the plan. It's important enough to me that I have recommended that it become one of my goals, one of my superintendent goals, as part of my evaluation plan, that we have an implementation plan for this and that we can demonstrate, I think it was at least 5 major district decisions, and that we can demonstrate how this tool was used in those decisions. And so as we develop that implementation plan, all of that will be part of it. It'll also be part of my evaluation that happens a couple of times a year to show that this is a priority for my work and that I'm helping others to implement it as well. So that is my piece. Thank you once again, not only to you two, but I know that there are a lot of people behind you that were part of this process and part of the planning and setting up tables and making copies and answering questions. And thank you, Valentinis, for great food. But seriously, I really appreciate your support, not only in developing it, but I know that you're still here to help support us as we move forward and make sure that this becomes part of our culture as a district.
Member Oswald.
I just have two comments. One, the superintendent already mentioned, is that we'll be recommending to the board that the superintendent incorporate the TIA form and exactly how he uses it within his superintendent goals, which he will get evaluated on by the whole board twice a year. So we look forward to seeing how this works and how he is changing how he does and how it can improve things. I just wanted to touch on the fact that I also don't believe this form is an end-all be-all of anything. The form all by itself can't create any change. Honestly answering those questions that are on the form, I think we're going to come across some ugly answers. And it's in those ugly answers is where the opportunity for change will come from. I hope that we'll be brave enough to begin to predict and change how we do it, so the first time we answer it, it isn't as ugly as it could have been, and reminding ourselves how we need to be aware and ingrain this in what we do and how we do it. I'm very interested in seeing the plan develop, because I know a form isn't a plan either. So there's got to be more to it than that. It's more than a piece of paper. And I really am encouraged and hopeful that creating a culture of change is possible. And this gives me hope that that possibility is going to happen.
Member Gorham.
Just want to acknowledge that this is a huge step towards supporting systems change that's already in motion. But it's taking in another step, and you're seeing things happen that are going to be supporting the implementation of this. So I just think that's huge step. Thank you for the community partnership and the staff work on this. As a board member, I'll be supporting this moving forward. Very important. Just very grateful for the work.
Chair Kirby.
Oh, thank you. I know you acknowledged everybody else in the past here and no longer here that contributed to this, but I want to especially thank Mr. Howes for all the work that he did. A lot, both of you, but especially him. And I think that I will support this and look forward to moving forward.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Yep, I'll add my couple cents here. I appreciate what Member Gorham said, and really kind of second, third, fourth, whatever it is, the work that's been done on this and the leadership that Mr. William, that you provided on this. I think the resolution looks like it's just really well written in terms of acknowledging what we need to do, the next steps as well. And so I appreciate the thoughtfulness that was put into the resolution. And I also appreciated the statement that you started out your presentation with. So thank you again. And I had a question on, you provided, which I was glad you did, the 10 Minnesota commitments to equity. And I really appreciate it. I went to one of the conversations that happened with the Department of Ed this fall on ESS. And can you just share, when you were gathering input, did you use this statement, or can you highlight why you wanted to make sure we looked at this? Because I think these 10 commitments are extremely important to work we've done and will continue to do.
The 10 Minnesota Commitments to Equity is a document that has come out more recently than, it wasn't even readily available until, there were conversations around it mid-year, but it definitely not this past fall, and then it's really, they've rolled it out in all of the ESSA, all of Minnesota Department of Education's ESSA documents has this now included as a part of it. And so when there were discussions about including that in the ESSA work, and with that overarching impact that ESSA has on, all districts in all states, and the fact that Minnesota had chosen to embrace these 10 commitments, I thought were powerful commitments that our district might also consider embracing. And so being in alignment with the state in that regard, I think benefits our district to help us align our equity efforts with what the state is. And if and when there are the challenges that we will face when trying to implement various decisions that we make around equity, and as we struggle to understand that and how that plays a part, and as different groups share their concerns, us having these in alignment with the Minnesota Department of Education and their commitments to the ESSA work at the state level, I think reinforces our ability to implement these types of things, and it reinforces our ability to make these decisions knowing that they are supported by the Minnesota Department of Education and that they are fully aligned with an approved plan from the federal government through ESSA. And so I felt like they were 10 commitments that are both well written and clearly stated, and would help guide our district if adopted. And I felt that they were important enough to include as a part of the framework as guiding measures that we can be reminded of and remind ourselves of when we make our decisions and implement. So a lot of it was alignment with MDE and what they were choosing to do, and I felt like that strengthened our district commitment and also aligned it with MDE and the ESSA information.
Okay, great. Thank you for including it, and I hope that we can use it as part of training and teaching as well as aligning. And I will be supporting the resolution, and just again appreciate all the months of work that have gone into this and the many conversations. And thanks for the great food too, Salam.
Member Gorham.
Thanks. So as we're going to be approving or considering our resolution, giving direction to develop an implementation plan and to do this, at some point down the road, maybe as a part of that implementation plan, do we solidify any of this in policy? Because, as the years go by, the leaders change. And if we want to sustain a culture of something, does this need to become a policy at some point?
If you're asking my opinion, whatever strengthens this commitment to equity within our district, whatever that is, I do believe that we should go down that road. And so if it needs to become policy, whatever those measures are within our district, to make them as strong as we can make them so they cause the type of change that we want to see, and they help us guide us towards the best possible education for every single student, regardless of all of the areas determined in the definition. Absolutely, I would be supportive of that myself. Again, this is not necessarily a combination of, or this is not myself, this is a combination of the input gathered, but I would absolutely support whatever measures it took within our district to ensure that these are long-lasting and that they are commitments that do lead to that systemic change. So I'll leave the policy works thing to those who do those types of things.
I appreciate your answer to it, but yeah, it was a kind of more of a contemplative thought, and I'm interested to hear and have conversation about that in the future if it's something to pursue.
And as we work to conclude, I think this area, I don't see any mics on, but I have 3 comments. I also challenge our board as we set goals for our 4 years together, that if we're going to review our superintendent on using the equity tool and the definition, that when we make things, that would be our goals as well, and our community will hold us accountable. And I hope that we will embrace those challenges too. I do have a question, because I think I understand, but I know there's some feedback in our community about our recommended implementation measures, the years. It seems like some would want everything to happen in the first year. But I also would go to the 10 Minnesota commitments to equity. And when it says start from within and focus on your leadership team first, I think that's where, I want to lead our community to understand that when we move forward, we have to have our leadership and administration and school board fully engaged, trained in the right way before we go further. But do you want to speak to the implementation steps a bit?
Yeah, again, what was included in the letter was a combination of ideas and suggestions and input from all of the stakeholder groups that I started out talking about. And I guess what I was intending to do with that information was to provide ideas of what is possible and some sort of a combination of the types of ideas that were provided by all those groups. And so those aren't by any means, I'm not saying you need to adopt these. The resolution as it's written says that the board would direct the superintendent's office to actually make the actual implementation plan and accountability measures. We wanted to include those accountability measures and the ideas around implementation because that was part of the information that we asked stakeholders to provide to us. And so those are ideas. There are, some that are conflicting, some that are over here and some that are over there. What we tried to do was provide some insight into the type of input that we got back from a variety of stakeholder groups. I would encourage, superintendent and the superintendent's office to have to convene a leadership team around the implementation plan and have a lot of different perspectives and stakeholder groups as a part of that to ensure that the implementation plan is representative of a variety of stakeholder groups and that there is a lot of insight into that plan that is both realistic when it comes to implementation and but also meaningful. And it's difficult to do everything at once in one year. And so that's why the implementation plan as it looks there with year 1, 2, 3, 4 is just kind of broken down. But again, that's just an example of what might be considered. I think the superintendent said it well in his statements. So they are ideas to be considered, and we share them as information. We share them as resources for considerations. And I hope that answers.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's was a good reflection. And again, going back to what Member Oswald said too, that just as a journey and lots of uncomfortableness sometimes, and I just want to encourage us to share that and be bold in our conversation and willing to hold each other accountable when something isn't really the focus we want, and we'll learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you, and I just want to state that I myself, as well as as a staff member of our district, I look forward to being able to utilize this framework, both utilize it to hold my colleagues accountable to it, but also for my colleagues to hold myself accountable to that. And that's the spirit of my work in agreeing to help our district move forward in this was for those purposes, not just for others to do it, but also for myself included as a part of that. And so I appreciate the opportunity to gather this information, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to share that and present that for consideration next week. So thank you very much.
Yep, we're on to diploma requests, and on Tuesday we will be reviewing those 45 or so names. I read each one of them aloud, right? Next Tuesday?
On Tuesday.
Yes, next Tuesday I will. All of them. Okay. Question, Loeffler Kim?
No.
Oh, okay. And so we've got the June diploma requests. And then we are on to the data sharing agreements. We have proposals, recommendations that we approve, that we don't have to vote on. Just information that we are granting the College of St. Scholastica's TRIO program, the College of St. Scholastica's Upward Bound, Lutheran Social Services, and our Yes Duluth Workforce data sharing agreements. I think we come to the end of our, unless there's some placeholders or extended trip requests, I haven't gotten anything. Member Loeffler.
Superintendent Grunt said, I thought that usually we have, and I'm wondering if we're going to have next week, the East and the Denfeld kind of listing. So we acknowledge that we've graduated the East and Denfeld, and so we've had their booklet program.
With all the names.
Yeah.
I want to say that we usually have done that in July.
Okay, I knew it was, I thought it was June, but.
Yeah.
So just follow up, and if we need to add it, let's, make sure we don't forget them. Okay, thank you.
Member Oswald.
I just wanted to take a minute to say thanks to Mike Carey, because it's your last education committee meeting with us, and I appreciate the honest, bold conversations that we've had, and that we've been able to share our ideas even when they differ. So thank you for being who you are, and good luck in Cloquet.
I move to adjourn.